Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1050 for March 31st, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
You know, I had every chemistry set, easy bake oven, erector set, whatever it was. I just like to make things. Even if I was playing outside, I was building a fort or making a sculpture with mud. Whatever it was, I just made stuff.
These days, Andrea Wilson makes whiskey, and she's pretty good at it. She's the Master of Maturation at Kentucky's Michter's Distillery and a 2022 inductee into the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame. This week, Michter's unveiled the 2024 edition of its 10-year-old bourbon. I'll talk with Andrea about that whiskey, as well as her career, and Michter's being named the most admired whiskey in the world in last year's Drinks International poll. That's just ahead, along with the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever wondered where Redbreast got its name? Well, let's go back to 1912 and be glad our bird-watching founder didn't spot the bar-tailed godwit that day.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast, Redbreast. Pass it on.
Hey everyone, it's me, Gabriel Cardarello with Jewers, and I'm here to introduce you to something very special. We've gone and blended the time-honored whiskey craftsmanship of Scotland with the whiskey-making finesse of Japan. And let me tell you, it's something truly remarkable. More on that in a minute.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Kentucky's Vintage Distilled Spirits Law update is on Governor Andy Beshear's desk. This week, state lawmakers approved a bill to close loopholes in the law that created a legally questionable market in highly sought-after whiskeys. The bill makes it illegal for stores to buy more than 24 bottles a year from an individual seller, while also making it illegal for individuals to sell more than 24 bottles a year. Stores will also have to buy a $300 annual license and report their purchases to state regulators on a monthly basis. Governor Beshear has not taken a public position on the bill. It's not known whether he will sign it into law, veto it, or allow it to become law without his signature. Lots of new whiskeys to talk about this week. Australia's Starward whiskey is releasing a unique collaboration with Lagavulin. The Aussies took their Nova single malt and finished it for 18 months in ex-Lagavulin casks. I talked with Starward founder David Vitale and Lagavulin master blender Stuart Morrison about the collaboration this week.
We're not a rolling stone at Starward in terms of innovation and always looking for things that haven't been done before. And I have a very long, affection for peated whiskey market. Sort of dates back to the start of Starward. One of the inspirations was, how can we be as distinctive as peated whiskey is to Scotch? And so it was always sort of written in the stars, so to speak, that we'd do something like this, and it was just a matter of time before we could make the approach and then have a conversation about it.
Stuart, what did you think when they told you they wanted to mature Starward whiskey in Lagavulin barrels?
As with all our innovations, you really just have to keep an open mind and see how it goes. We try and have the mindset that give something a go. If it doesn't work, then take your learnings from that and move on. I think the opposite of that has happened here. This is quite a successful experiment.
Tell me how the experiment worked. What did you do specifically?
The casks left Scotland on the 15th of October 2021. I found the dispatch invoice that was sent to me. So it would be, 8 weeks on the water or so?
Yeah.
And then over to you guys.
Yeah, and then obviously opening that container door, you just kind of got a huge waft. It was basically like being in a Bond store in Isla, and we basically had a batch of Nova, barrel-proof Nova ready to go, and then filled the Lagavulin casks with that spirit, which had been, about 3 years of age by the time we refilled the barrels and then finished them off for 18 months.
Normally you do 5 years maturation for Nova, right, David?
It depends. Like we're kind of, at the moment we're sort of sitting between 3 and 4 Melbourne years. So it was effectively a ready product at that point in time. And then we just wanted to ladder up that flavor. And I think the curiosity for us is, there's lots of peated whiskies finished in typically fortified wine barrels.
Mm-hmm.
What if we started with a whiskey aged in wine barrels, red wine barrels, and then finished them in peated casks? So it's the inverse of what typically happens. And so it didn't need that long, given the sort of strong phenolic aspect of what happens in a peated cask, for that influence to sort of exist in the whiskey.
There's no shortage of whiskeys that have been finished in Islay casks over the years, but this is the first time I've seen Lagavulin's name put on one of them from another producer. Why was that the case, Stuart? Why did the distillery allow its name to be used?
The team that look after the brand, it's really a decision that lies with them. We can help do things like supply casks and such like, but when it comes to who uses which name and such like, we leave that to the hands of those responsible.
I'd like to think it's the team's, good looks and charm. At Starward, they kind of got that over the line. But I think that, we're extremely humbled. I think you're right, Mark. I've not seen a Lagavulin name on a whiskey before, that's for sure. So to kind of have that privilege and honor as one of the younger distilleries in the world to have a 200-year-old brand name on it is huge and such a wonderful thing for Starward.
The new whiskey will be available globally after an initial ballot release at the Starward website. The recommended retail price is $130 a bottle. I'll have my tasting notes for it later on. Scotland's Ballinadaloch distillery has released its first single malts, an 8-year-old that will be the flagship of the distillery's lineup, along with 2 single cask bottlings. One matured for 8 years in an Oloroso sherry butt, and one matured for 7 years in an ex-bourbon barrel. All 3 are available exclusively in the UK for now. Loch Lomond Whiskies has unveiled its Open Championship bottlings for this year. The Open Special Edition is finished in French Chardonnay casks, while the Open Course Collection release is a 24-year-old single malt finished in Manzanilla sherry casks. The Open Special Edition will sell for £45 a bottle in the UK, while the Open Course Collection Edition sells for £290 a bottle. Meanwhile, golf's PGA Championship returns to Louisville's Valhalla Golf Club in May, and Heaven Hill is releasing a special commemorative edition of its Elijah Craig small batch bourbon. Elijah Craig is the official bourbon of the PGA of America, and the bottle features the tournament's Wanamaker trophy along with the tournament logo on the cork. The suggested retail price is $36.99 a bottle. I mentioned Charlie McLean's charity foundation that he started with his sons last year, and now they're releasing the first McLean Foundation whiskey. It's a 6-year-old single cask from Ardna Merkin that was donated by the distillery for the project, which will fund clean water projects in Madagascar. Bottles are available through Royal Mile Whiskies for £115 a bottle. Redbreast is out with a new travel retail exclusive bottling. The Cuatro Barrios edition brings together 4 different cask types: ex-bourbon, Spanish Oloroso casks, Portuguese tawny port casks, and virgin European oak. It's the 4th edition in Redbreast's Iberian series and is available exclusively at Dublin and Cork airport shops for €108 a bottle. Templeton Distillery in Iowa is known for its sourced rye whiskeys, but the distillery has been laying down stocks of its own bourbon for several years. Now it's releasing Templeton Fortitude Bourbon in April. It's a high rye bourbon with 40% rye in the mash bill, and all of the corn in the bourbon comes from local farms within 15 miles of the distillery. It'll carry a recommended retail price of $39.99 each. Indiana's Hard Truth Distilling is releasing its second collaboration with the Mellencamp Whiskey Company. Farmer's Reserve is a blend of Hard Truth's chocolate malt rye and sweet mash bourbon finished in toasted Amburana oak barrels. It'll go on sale this Saturday with a release party at the Distillery in Nashville, Indiana. Sazerac's A. Smith Bowman Distillery in Virginia is launching a new experimental collection of whiskeys. The Abraham Bowman Oak Series will explore cask maturation in different types of oak from throughout the world, along with the impact charring has on the flavor of whiskey. The initial release is a French oak aged for 12 years in both charred and uncharred barrels. The bottles will be sold through an online lottery that takes place from April 4th through the 11th, and we have a link for more details at the WhiskyCast website. That's where you can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long, along with the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's open up the calendar and see what's happening in the world of whiskey. Lots coming up this weekend. We have the Detroit Bourbon Fest on Saturday, along with Big Smoke meets Whiskey Fest in Tampa, Florida, the Vilnius Whiskey Festival in Lithuania, and the Miami Whiskey Mash in Miami. Milam and Green Distillery is holding a solar eclipse party next Monday at the Distillery in Blanco, Texas. The Whiskey Festival Hoorn is next weekend on April 12th and 13th in Hoorn, the Netherlands. The Whiskey Bear Rhein-Ruhr is April 13th and 14th in Dusseldorf, Germany, and BC Distilled is on the 13th in Vancouver, British Columbia. Tickets are still available for Whiskey and Barrel Night in Washington, D.C. on the 18th, the Gothenburg Beer and Whiskey Festival in Gothenburg, Sweden on the 19th and 20th, and the Wee Whiskey Fest in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, the 19th through the 21st. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Dewar's has truly been innovative in perfecting cask finishing, which has led to exceptional expressions of our craftsmanship. This extra step allows our whiskey to further mature in carefully selected casks and marks the final stage of our double aging process, or in Dewar's case, our double aging method, resulting in unique, indulgent tasting experiences. The new Dewar's Double 21-year Mizunara oak cask finish undergoes a meticulous 4-stage aging process, including being finished in sought-after Japanese Mizunara oak casks. Crafting these casks is challenging due to the non-straight growth of Mizunara oak, and it takes 200 years for these trees to reach full potential. The result, a masterfully balanced whiskey with notes of sandalwood, coconut, and creamy vanilla, to name a few. And while it's not the easiest to find, it's an unmissable experience.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. Last fall, Michter's was named the world's most admired whiskey brand in a survey by Drinks International. It's the first time an American whiskey brand has earned that honor. Andrea Wilson is the Master of Maturation for Michter's, as well as Chief Operating Officer. That makes her responsible for the entire production process from grain to glass. This week, Michter's announced that its 2024 release of 10-year-old bourbon will be available starting next month. It's not always an annual release. 2 years ago, Wilson and master distiller Dan McKee decided the whiskey wasn't ready yet and skipped that year's release. That same year, Wilson was inducted into the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame for her contributions to the bourbon industry. We connected on a Zoom call this week. First of all, let's talk about the new 10-year-old bourbon that's coming out next month.
Yeah.
Coming on the heels of being named the world's most admired whiskey, did you have any more pressure than usual to get this one right?
Well, I will just say there is always pressure. Michter's has such a high standard of excellence, and we're always working to, the goal every day when we come here is to try to create the best American whiskey that we can. Whether we are or not, people will judge that, but that's the goal every day. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure we put on ourselves to really provide the best quality that we can whenever we release any of our products. And so when we did the 10-year this year, you just have to remember kind of the journey that we've been on the last few years. So 2022, we did not release 10-year bourbon because we decided to hold it to increase the quality of the, memorable experience that people have around 10-year. And so we held it in 22. Then in 23, we also had the pressure of, hopefully it's as good as we think it is, because we released it and we had tremendous feedback and very positive experiences from people being conveyed to us about their experience with the 10-year bourbon. So we were super thrilled about that. And now to achieve most admired whiskey in the world is something very, very special to us, not just for Michter's, but for the American whiskey category overall. And then to be able to, come into the new year and really have some beautiful 10-year bourbon available for this release, and, choosing and going through that process was super exciting. And so I personally think it's beautiful. Dan thinks it's beautiful. I'm very excited for people to enjoy it. It's one of the things that I think consumers look forward to as far as our releases. And so we're excited about it. So, yeah.
What do you look for when you're deciding on barrels?
So I think it's important first to understand that we have a 30-year planning horizon that we look at, and it's not a concept of, we're tasting through them and this one's better, so maybe put that in the 10-year lane, or, this one's better, maybe it gets held for 20-year. We don't actually work that way. Everything is aging. We try to be, consistent in our aging processes so that everything is getting the opportunity to increase the maturing quality of that spirit through the aging process. And we want that to happen uniformly across all of our aging processes. So when it comes time to release a 10-year, what we do is we say, what are the stocks that we have available now for 10-year? And that means it can be anything between 10-year and a day, all the way up to 20-year, which is our next release. And so, and anything in between is an opportunity for release for the 10-year products. So our 10-year products are always overaged. We enjoy the opportunity to really be able to select what we think represents the best quality for that release. When we get down to actually deciding, when we're pulling, the different stocks, we are tasting through them for, what are the aromatics? What is the taste profile? How does it navigate across your palate? What is the texture? What is the finish? But also, more importantly, sitting with that whiskey for a period of time. So not just assuming that everybody's going to drink it in the first 10 minutes. You want to put yourself in the position of how a consumer is going to enjoy that product. And, they're going to want to sit with it for a while. And so how is that whiskey going to evolve as it's sitting in the glass? And I think that's a very important part of the experience, because we get so many people who talk about, the Michter's 10-year as a really memorable experience. We have people all over the world who are tied to certain years because of the way it resonated for them. And I love that, because that's part of the beauty of this particular release, is it's very memorable for people.
You produce whiskeys across a wide variety of the spectrum, from the sour mash and the US1 toasted barrel all the way up to the 20-year bourbon. What goes into creating these expressions on a day-to-day basis?
Well, a lot goes into that, but, we always say a company is is nothing without its people. We have an incredibly talented team of people here. Of course, our master distiller, Dan McKee, Matt Bell, our vice president of production and distiller, Ariel Burgos, who is our distillery manager, Marcus Neiman, who is our overseas quality, Catherine Onan, who is our overseas blending and planning, and and many others I'm missing on our team right now. But the team works so hard together to be consistent, be repeatable, make sure that we are looking through all the quality variables, because there are a million things that can go wrong in the course of a day, from everything that when you bring the grain truck in all the way through, cooking and fermentation and distilling, making sure the barrels meet all of our specifications. For, any of your listeners who don't know, Michter's has 6 production techniques. The first is, we're all single barrel and small batch. Our batches are incredibly small. They're only the equivalent of 20 full barrels. That's our tank sizes. So the precision and accuracy to which we have to be able to do things really matters, because we can't afford to have off notes when our batches are so small. We use all naturally seasoned and air dried wood. At least 18 months natural seasoning and air drying outside is what we look for. But in some cases, we actually naturally season and air dry longer than that. We toast all of our barrels before we char them to maximize the amount of extractive compounds we can get from the natural wood itself. And then we heat cycle all of our warehouses during the winter to increase the interaction between the whiskey and the wood, to increase the maturing quality of that final spirit. And then we custom chill filter all of our products. But the single biggest thing that we do at Michter's is our low entry proof. So we enter into wood at 103 entry proof, which means we're about 75% whiskey in the barrel and about 25% water. Now, that water has the benefit of being in the barrel, being part of the aging process. Everybody will be aware you can put sugar in water, it dissolves very easily. So you translate that to the barrel. Those wood sugars, those soluble compounds really can make a difference in the overall way that whiskey expresses itself. And so the signature of Michter's is rich, smooth, easy drinking whiskey that warms you here, but doesn't give you heartburn, in your chest. Just a nice warm finish at the back of your throat, but not something that gives you that pain in your chest, so to speak. So those are the signatures of Michter's. So when you think about all of that, all of the quality work that goes into making sure things are repeatable and consistent is what ultimately lends itself to the repeatable, consistent profile of Michter's across all of our expressions.
So there's no difference from year to year, hopefully.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, there are little nuances of difference in our single barrel products. For example, somebody might say, oh, this one's just a little hint more floral, if it's a rye, or, this one might have just a little bit more citrus note on it. We want people to have the beauty of the single barrel experience, for example, but we don't want it to be a departure. Like if you have Michter's 10-year single barrel rye this year and you have it next year, we want you to experience that Michter's house style, even though there might be little nuances of difference. And of course, there may be a difference in the age too. You might feel that, for you, this one was something that but the house style is there. And, that's what's really important to us.
A lot of folks argue about entry proof, and you mentioned the low entry proof that Michter's has. How did you settle on 51%? Or I'm sorry, 53 proof?
So we enter into the barrel at 103 proof. And if we go back in time a little bit, the old standard for entry proof used to be a maximum of 110. And that changed in 1962 when distillers came together and basically said we need to do something because it was a downturn in the American whiskey business. And distillers came together and said, well, if we have the law changed to increase the entry proof to 125, that will save us on the number of barrels we need and the number of barrel spaces we need. So it was purely a cost saving measure. And now the maximum entry proof is now under the law 125. And so we do conform to the old standard. Willie Pratt was our first distillery here, and Willie had experience with the lower entry proof. And in fact, if you go back and you look at, a lot of the historical dusties that are out there, and, people will talk about them and the profiles of them, whiskeys that were distilled a long time ago, 70s and 80s. A lot of them talk about sweet, creamy, easy drinking. Those were some of the signatures of those lower entry proof products. And, I think ultimately it has worked, it has worked very well for Michter's in terms of the quality profile of the whiskey that we want to create. You get something that really allows the individuality of the different flavor compounds to come through in the whiskey versus something that is, dominated by a lot more of the wood characteristics. The wood is there. It provides a beautiful roundness and maturity to the product, but it doesn't dominate, some of those beautiful, richer, like your fruit esters, for example. I think in some of our older age products, the fruit still comes through. It's not dominated by those oaky characteristics as much. So I think that's part of the beauty of lower entry proof.
Let's talk about you now. How did you get started in the business?
So my grandfather was a moonshiner here in Kentucky, and he had to give that up to marry my grandmother. I'm required to say that by the family code. But then my great uncle also worked for Seagram, which was, an enormous organization. And so as a young person, I was very influenced by them, family discussions. But my grandfather used to take all the grandchildren fishing, and every fishing trip always ended with a trip to the distillery to taste mash and talk to his friends and whatever. We thought it was completely fascinating. And then we also made beer and wine as a family, as kids. It was nothing commercial, just for family, friends, holidays, things like that. And I was a child that always liked to make things. So, I learned how to cook from my mom, my grandmas. I love to cook. I love to bake. I had every chemistry set, easy bake oven, erector set, whatever it was. I just like to make things. Even if I was playing outside, I was building a fort or making a sculpture with mud, whatever it was, I just made stuff. And so as I got older, I really felt like I wanted to go in the spirits industry. I chose, it's different now. There are schools, there are curriculums, certificates, all kinds of stuff you can take to get into this industry. But it wasn't like that for me. So, I've always had mentors in my life, and someone said, you should consider going into chemical engineering because that will be the closest thing to distillation. So I chose chemical engineering. I graduated with a master's in chemical engineering and was hoping for my big break in the industry. And then sadly, it was the 90s. The industry was not booming like it is now. And so you find out two things very quickly. This industry is, people come into it and they don't leave. They stay in their careers for 30 and 40 years. There's not a lot necessarily of movement, especially in a time when the industry was not growing. And so those two things really did not create an opportunity for a job for me. So I became a project engineer for a global consulting firm, and I did that for about 8-9 years. And I loved it very much because so many people influenced my life. And was able to learn so much about different manufacturing environments, different business acumen. It was a great time in my life. And then Diageo called me one day, and I worked for Diageo and just did everything I could. They hired me full time after a couple of years, and I worked for them for a long time and made it my business just to learn as much as I could. And in actuality, it was always interesting to me because my great uncle worked for Seagram, and a lot of people were at Diageo at the time that I was there that were old Seagram employees, and they imparted an enormous wealth of knowledge to me that would have taken me probably a lifetime to learn. And so I'm grateful to all of those people, including my teachers, my mom, my dad, all of the people who've influenced me to get to be able to be where I'm now. So I left Diageo in 2014, and I've been with Michter's now about 10 years. So it's been great fun.
And you're not just the director of maturation, but you're also the chief operating officer.
Yes, that's right. I look after all things Michter's. So, and I enjoy it. I think one of the greatest things, I work for a wonderful family. I mean, they just couldn't be more passionate about American whiskey. And I think it's incredible to see. But they're also very collaborative, and we've created a very collaborative environment, which I think is so great, because if you work, different companies, different corporations, things are often siloed. Oh, you're in procurement, you're in operations, you're in, engineering. Whereas here, we're very cross-functional. Like, everybody knows all different segments, front to back, of supply chain and what we're doing here. And I think that is an incredible opportunity for our talent and for the future of not only Michter's, but the bourbon business. So it's exciting.
Did you face any unique challenges as a woman getting into the industry?
I've had this question before, and I wouldn't characterize it as a woman. I would just characterize it as I put an incredible amount of pressure on myself. I am always trying to do my very best every day. I want tomorrow to be better than yesterday. And I don't like to, make mistakes. I don't like to fail. But I think over the years, I've also gotten a reconciliation that, sometimes in failure, you can actually learn a whole lot. It may not be what you wanted to learn, and it can be painful, but you actually learn a lot, and that can benefit you long-term in terms of your experiences and knowledge that you're able to impart to someone else. So, I often, care more. I don't want it to sound like I don't care about myself. I do. But I want to see people succeed. And I put a lot into trying to make sure that, we succeed and our team succeeds. And so I would say I put a lot of pressure on myself is probably my hardest challenge.
What was it like a couple of years ago to get the phone call about being named to the Bourbon Hall of Fame?
Well, first there were tears. And, tears of joy. I mean, it's an incredible thing. My family was so excited, very excited, and of course, it was a little like, oh my gosh, that is an amazing thing. I think what was so impactful for me, though, is to see the legends in the industry stand up for me and the contributions that I've made to our industry. And I'm just so grateful for that. I just do what I do because I love it. I mean, I genuinely love making whiskey. I love to hear the stories. I mean, there's nothing more impactful for me when somebody comes along and says, oh, my very first time I drank Michter's was this. And I did it with this person, and it was the most amazing thing. Let me tell you about it. And your impact, we touch people's lives with this product, and it's used in people's most special moments, whether they're celebrating, a child, a wedding, friends getting together from college, whatever it is, it could just be a holiday or dinner, I don't know, but there's special moments and you want your product to be really well. And I'm just so grateful to be honored in the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame, and more honored to have made such relationships over the years across the industry, and just incredible people have influenced me in my career, and I'm just so grateful.
How do you define success?
Well, I think success is very individualized. I think certainly success for Michter's is, creating a consistent, high quality product, operating at a high standard of excellence, having an amazing team of people who help us achieve that every day, having, great bartenders, people in the restaurant community, consumers, and just writers, people like yourself all over the world supporting, Michter's and telling our story. To me, that is, what success looks like. And I think being, humble and honest and, telling your story, I think is very authentic. I think for me personally, success, comes from, my faith, my family, my friends, and doing something that I love to do. It really brings me incredible joy to be able to do this.
Thanks to Andrea Wilson of Michter's for joining us on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. Let's start the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the latest release from Michter's, the Barrel Strength Rye. This single-barrel whiskey is bottled at 55% ABV, and the nose has touches of baking spices, molasses cookies, and a soft oakiness. The taste has cinnamon, clove, and allspice notes, balanced by molasses, dried apples, and oak tannins, while the finish is long with subtle spices and a touch of oak. I'm scoring the 2024 Michter's Barrel Strength Rye a 92. Next up, the Lost Lantern bottling of a Cedar Ridge, Iowa wheat whiskey. This single-barrel whiskey is bottled at 61.6% ABV. The nose has touches of freshly baked wheat bread, along with honey, dark chocolate, and dried fruits. The taste is thick and chewy with black peppercorns, balanced by hints of honey, linseed oil, and dark chocolate. The finish, long, dry, and subtle. I'm scoring the Lost Lantern Cedar Ridge, Iowa wheat whiskey a 91. Finally, let's look at the collaboration between Australia's Starward Distillery and Lagavulin that we heard about during the news. This one is bottled at 48% ABV, and the nose has notes of raspberry jam, heather, honey, and a subtle peatiness. The taste starts off fruity and tart, then the Lagavulin influence kicks in with peat smoke, heather, and a hint of brine, while not overwhelming sweet notes of fresh berries. The finish is long and smoky, yet well-balanced with a nice fruity character. I like this one. I'm scoring the Starward Lagavulin finish a 93. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of nearly 3,700 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
The average college basketball power forward is 6'9", which, according to my rough calculations, is 16.5 times my height. I'll stick to aimlessly pottering around in back gardens.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's open up the WhiskyCast community app and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey. More on the Starward and Lagavulin collaboration. I posted a photo of the bottle on social media the other day, and David posted this on the app. I love the idea of this. Australian whiskey is just so exciting at the moment. It really appeals to me, especially the boldness. I just tasted the Morris Smoked Muscat, and it blew me away. Tin Shed Distilling is also making some sensational whiskey. This combo being red wine and Islay smoke is something to really look forward to. Can't wait to try it. Got some pushback on last week's tasting notes for the Woodford Reserve Baccarat Kentucky Derby 150th Anniversary Edition, priced at $15,000 a bottle. SMS LHC posted it on Instagram, "What a joke!" And Watchman 999 Tornado also posted on Instagram, $15K. I'm having enough trouble with a 1-liter store pick for $65. I don't set the prices, I just report them. If there's something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, share it with us in the WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the iOS and Google Play app stores. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, X, and Threads at WhiskyCast, and my email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com.
100 individual farms of Irish barley, separately harvested, malted, fermented, distilled and matured. Is that too much effort? Perhaps. Unless you're interested in flavour above all else. Waterford Whiskey, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Balcones Distilling. This past Wednesday, we celebrated International Whiskey Day, a fixture every year on March 27th. The reason it is celebrated on March 27th is because that was the birthday of the legendary beer and whiskey writer Michael Jackson. If you've been around whiskey for a while, you may remember when his Malt Whiskey Companion book was part of every serious whiskey geek's collection. I still have a copy of the 2004 edition, but Michael wrote nearly 24 books about whiskey and beer after years spent as a working journalist, and he's regarded to this day as the pioneer of today's whiskey writing boom. Over the years, Michael Jackson won the James Beard Award, the Glenfiddich Trophy, and was named not only a keeper of the Quake, but a master of the Quake. Jackson died in August of 2007 after suffering from Parkinson's disease. We talked in April of 2007, just a few months before his passing.
I think I'm doing pretty well. I've had Parkinson's for at least 10 years, possibly even might be even nearer 20 years. And it was diagnosed for sure 10 years ago. And in the last 10 years, I've probably worked as hard or harder than ever. Writing books and travelling around the world and doing public appearances and so forth, to the tastings and things. With Parkinson's, the medication they give you tends to work well for 8 or 9 or 10 years, and it starts to lose its grip a little bit. So they've been trying other stuff with me, and when they're trying this other stuff, it's sometimes you're having different dosages and playing around with it a bit, and the problems of Parkinson's become a bit more evident, and that was really why I had to go public with it. People say, "How are you doing?" And I say, "Well, I'm rocking and rolling," and I'm rocking and rolling a bit, but I'm out there working and working hard, and I intend to carry on working hard.
In fact, when his publishers tried to release an updated version of the Malt Whiskey Companion several years after his death, it took 3 writers to do the job Jackson did by himself. Jackson's name lives on in the Michael James Jackson Foundation for Brewing and Distilling, which supports education and career advancement for minorities in the brewing and distilling industries. If you have something or someone you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Balcones Distilling, the original Texas whiskey at the forefront of the American single malt movement. exploring place and provenance with unique style whiskeys, ranging from the award-winning Texas One and Lineage American single malts to their Baby Blue straight corn whiskey and Texas Rye bottled in bond. Discover whiskey from a new perspective at balconesdistilling.com. That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and of course you'll find a complete archive of past episodes that goes all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the Apple and Google App Stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Dewar's Double 21-year-old Mizunara Oak Cask Finish is like a worldly whiskey adventure you simply can't miss. Courtesy of your friends at Dewar's. Savor it responsibly. Copyright 2024, Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 46% alcohol by volume.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Robin Redbreast? You may have seen me around. Face label, label face. Yeah, that's the one. I'm now contractually obligated to be their spokesbird. Yeah, my agent didn't read the small print.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.